Hello there, thank you for joining me on this session for managing our emotional health and wellbeing for parents and carers. My name's Jodie, I'm a Child Health Project Officer within the Child Health team at Medway Public Health, Medway Council. I'm also a parent to an adolescent teenage young man, so I appreciate the challenges that parenthood and caring for a young person brings, and that actually our emotional health and wellbeing can sometimes be put on the back burner and it isn't at the forefront, when actually fundamentally that's what needs to happen. If we haven't got emotionally regulated adults, we haven't got emotionally regulated children and young people, and that just creates a vicious cycle of behaviours and needs being displayed in ways that aren't conducive to a thriving, healthy and happy home. And there's no judgment here. Like I say, I get it. I'm not always firing on all cylinders and sometimes I'm not always emotionally regulated, but it's noticing, repairing, reflecting and developing on from those incidents, as well as communicating that with our children and young people when appropriate and developmentally right, for them to learn that this is a human experience and we react and respond in ways that we don't always intend, but it's the growth, it's the learning lessons that's important from that. So I hope that that brings some assurance to you. It's not this you should be, there's no shoulds here, shoulds aren't helpful. This is a time to reflect, to think about what you need. What do you need? As parents and carers, we're always and absolutely thinking about the needs of our children and young people and the people that we have a caring responsibility for. However, our needs are important. We are important and we need that time, kindness and space to nurture, grow and heal. So with that in mind, have you got protected time for this session? Are there people around you that still need your time and energy right now? If so, maybe park it, allocate some time in your diary. And I know it's the most precious commodity and you might laugh at it and think, when do I have time? But carve it out. Maybe pause that show that you was going to watch this evening, put that till tomorrow, catch it on replay, or perhaps in the morning if you're a morning lark, wake up a little bit earlier and just take some time to reflect on your needs and how you are. Check in with yourself and think about your coping strategies or resources that you have available. With that in mind, we will be sending out additional resources should you need them if you email us at childhealth@medway.gov.uk. I'm going to say that again, childhealth@medway.gov.uk. If you need any additional resources, any of the signposting information, you can always pause and kind of take a photo of at the end. But if there's any additional things that come up during this session or more information you're interested to find out, email us and we'll happily respond to that. But we can't have those connected conversations with you. So who in your support network around you could do that, could offer that for you? Perhaps drop them a message or let them know, hey, we're going to be doing this. Are they interested? You know, share knowledge is power. But equally, if not, and that doesn't sit right for them, have they got some time where perhaps you could just have a connected conversation because you realised this or you learned this or you didn't know and you're curious, because sadly we haven't got the capacity to have those with you even though we would love to. So with that in mind, if you've got the protected time, the space, the energy to step into this, I'll move on. So today's session, we'll be looking at maintaining positive emotional health and wellbeing. We'll be looking at some public health models that touch on mental health and the continuum that it's kind of measured against. We won't be diving into mental health conditions, although we absolutely can live well, and many members of the community live with a mental health condition. So please don't feel that this isn't for you if you're living with a mental health condition at the moment, because it's looking at your coping strategies whilst thriving, and that's what we want to do. We want to enable all of the members of our community to thrive regardless of their circumstances. But if there's any certain topics or conditions, health conditions that you're seeking more information or support on, please do email us and then we can signpost you, point you in the right direction, either local or national services that can help you with that. But we will be looking at mainly today the ways that we can nurture and develop our coping strategies, and also some suggestions on just staying connected to and tapping into our needs, like I was saying a short while ago. So it might be helpful to have a notepad, pen, or however you find best for making notes and going back to. It might be a voice note to self, could be writing it down, it could be doodling, drawing, whatever resonates with you. Might be helpful for anything that comes up for you to go back to when it feels right or is presented, or don't, and just be present in this moment. There is no right and wrong. This is your session for you. So yeah, I will move on to the next slide. Now it's just to reinforce that message of, are you in a safe space? Have you the energy, the emotional capacity to dive into the session today? You might have had a really full on day and just need that peace and time to be. Human beings, not human doings. So just reinforcing, is now the right time? Do you have a calm, quiet space? Do you have someone that you can connect with after? Or explore your learning further with after today. So it's just reinforcing that message there. I invite you now to extend that peace and to look at this picture with the eyes of a child, when everything in the world is awesome, when they notice a bus or a car and they think it's amazing. Look at the picture with the eyes of a child. What do you notice? Are there any colours, shapes, faces, patterns? Allow yourself to just be here in this moment, present with this picture. You haven't anything else to do. You haven't anywhere else to be other than here in this moment, connecting with this session, connecting with yourself. Allow the chair or the bed or wherever you're sitting to hold you. Let it serve its purpose and take the weight off. Allowing yourself to be held, any of the stresses and the strains of today to come out of your head and let it go. Be present in the now. And if you feel comfortable to, perhaps close your eyes and just focus on your breath. And if you've got lots of thoughts in your head, just allow them to pass by like clouds in the sky. And perhaps have a running dialogue of, I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out, to try and blot out any of those other things that might be present. We can be mindful at small parts of the day. It doesn't have to be closing your eyes, a deep meditation. It can be just noticing things around us. Even on your way to the commute to school or work, taking a different route, noticing the different seasons, the flora and fauna. Equally, your morning cuppa. If you're making a coffee or tea, you can just be present in that moment. Just allow yourself to connect with, I'm making a drink. You're not racing ahead thinking about all the other things you need to do that day. Notice the change in the colour of the water, the smells of the coffee or the tea, and just apply that being present. We're human beings, not human doings, so we need to carve out time to be, and just 1 minute a day can make all the difference. Don't knock it until you try it. And if you are a mindful practitioner and you apply it, then there's lots of different apps out there, YouTube videos, there's even documentaries on various screening platforms that you can dive into mindfulness and find ways that fit you, because we've all got different styles and needs. But just wanted that little sample for you to be grounded before we dive deeply into the session. Hope it helped. So what is emotional health and well-being? A lot of people say it's a buzzword, but it is more than that. It's whether we thrive we have that sense of life satisfaction, quality of life, the difference between thriving and surviving. So it's how we think, feel, and relate to ourselves. So that's self-esteem, how we interpret the world around us, any interactions. It's our view of self, it's our congruence, that sense of confidence, if we're positively engaged, if we've got a sense of belonging. So that's really, really important. There's a video that explains what mental health is and how closely related emotional health and well-being is, because as I say, it's that way that we would describe and interpret our sense of self and belonging. So it's important that we get a good sense of that. So I just invite you now to reflect on, what does emotional health and well-being mean to you? What would you say yours is? How would you measure it? How do you know if you've got positive emotional health and well-being? What signs and evidence have you got in your life that you're thriving? Or are you surviving? And if so, what can we do about that? We need to think about, okay, are all my needs being met, like that human sense of belonging? So yeah, it's important that we have a bit of a reflective practice now, and then there'll be a video in a short while, and then I'll be back to dive into the rest of the session. And if anything comes up here, it might be covered in the rest of the slides and the content, but if not, as I say, get in touch and we'll see what we can do.
We all have mental health. It is just as important as physical health. It is not only about mental illness or mental disorders. This is just one part of a bigger picture. It's best to think about mental health as being on a continuum, rather than people being either mentally ill or mentally well. We are all on the continuum, and we move up and down according to factors such as our genetic makeup and upbringing, our life circumstances, and the stresses we are under. At one end of the continuum, we have mental disorders, like depression or anxiety. And at the other end, we have states of positive mental health, when we're thriving, content, and fulfilled. The aim of mental health interventions is to move people up the continuum, so that they're able to reach their full potential and live satisfying lives. The World Health Organization describes mental health as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Being mentally healthy means being resilient and able to cope with difficult times, feeling in control, being confident, feeling good about yourself, managing and expressing your emotions, building and maintaining good relationships. We all experience periods when we feel stressed, worried, anxious, sad, afraid, or angry. These are all normal emotions. However, when these emotions become severe enough that it interferes with a person's ability to function daily, and these feelings become persistent over time, then it can develop into a mental health problem. There are many different types of mental disorders. When left untreated, mental disorders can be chronic and long-lasting, and are associated with increased disability. They significantly have an impact on daily functioning and frequently interfere with family, social, and work responsibilities. Fortunately, there are effective treatments and evidence-based interventions available that aim to help individuals understand and cope with symptoms of mental illness. However, very few people with mental disorders access existing treatment services. This may be due to barriers such as the stigma attached to seeking help, the lack of understanding of mental health problems, uncertainty of how to get help, or the fear of disclosing mental health problems. Research shows that stigma remains one of the biggest factors preventing people from seeking help early for their mental health problems and getting the appropriate support they need. It is important to acknowledge that we all have mental health, and have a personal responsibility to learn how we can improve and maintain our well-being in order to lead meaningful and satisfying lives. Want to learn how
So in that video, she spoke about mental health and well-being and ways that we can manage and take notice of, pay attention to our mental health. And this is a public health model on how we measure our well-being and our mental health condition. And as I said earlier in the session, it's people that live with a diagnosis, and mental health conditions aren't always lifelong. So we can experience a mental health condition for a set amount of time, we can recover, live well, and or experience fluctuations in those conditions over our life course. So that insight and knowledge of how we are, how our mental well-being is, that kind of level of self-awareness is vital in order to access support earlier, for that earlier intervention support. And I appreciate that isn't always possible. We have crisis, and that's why we have crisis intervention and different services for that part, but that's kind of high up on that scale of severe kind of needs and urgency. So if we can tap into our mental well-being, so if we are living well, we've got a sense of purpose, we're thriving, we're connected, then we can mitigate that experience or enduring long-term or poor mental health and experiencing a diagnosis or a mental health condition. I hope that makes sense. So if we look at this continuum here, we've got our well-being in the middle. So that cross-axis there is whether we have positive, maximum mental well-being, and at the bottom there, that's that kind of languishing, we are surviving rather than the thriving at the top end. And then through the middle, we've got whether we have no diagnosis of a mental health condition or severe diagnosis. So that just really stresses the fact that we can experience mental health conditions, but it doesn't mean that we can't live well if we've got the correct support, whether we have, talking therapies, so people around us supporting us in that experience, perhaps medication, different therapies, interventions, and holistic practices for managing our mental health condition, but equally practicing that for people that aren't experiencing at the time or have a diagnosis for mental health. So the top right is a person with no mental illness or a diagnosis, and they have positive mental health and well-being. So this is your kind of hashtag living your best life, thriving, feeling good, sense of purpose, sense of satisfaction. The other side of that is a person that has a diagnosis or a mental health condition, but actually they cope really well with it. They've got positive mental well-being. They have the appropriate support guidance around them to manage their mental health condition. So that's the top end of well-being. That's our maximum kind of well-being, thriving, living well. The opposite end of that, if you're looking at the bottom left hand, is a person with a diagnosis of a mental health condition, but actually they're experiencing poor mental health too. So they've got minimal well-being. They are surviving, they're not thriving. Perhaps it's someone that hasn't connections around them, they're socially isolated, so that exacerbates their mental health condition experience. Perhaps they're in temporary accommodation, experiencing homelessness, so they're really kind of languishing, they're not doing well at all. And then the other side of that is someone that hasn't got a mental health condition, but actually they haven't got positive well-being, they aren't experiencing good mental health at the moment. So it could be they are literally day to day, taking each day as it comes, they're kind of plodding along, but they haven't got that sense of life satisfaction. They don't feel like they're thriving or got choice and autonomy in their lives, which is really, really tricky to manage. Now, we don't stay in these quadrants. Life happens. We have curveballs. I've touched on homelessness. Sometimes, we have milestones that happen, perhaps redundancy, relationship breakdown. So we can go from one end of the continuum to another in a short amount of time, bereavement, etc., trauma. So it's those check-ins that I was saying about earlier, thinking about your needs. What do you need? Are you coping okay with what's happened? And sometimes we can't, and that's absolutely fine. And we might go to certain strategies of managing those situations that aren't always the most helpful or healthiest. But at the time, we're doing the best that we can with what we know and what we can cope with. So that's okay. And it's about that reflective practice and thinking about what else or who else, what can I do to meet my needs to help me thrive and get back to having a sense of life satisfaction and belonging, etc. So this is just the model, and as I say, we move around it. It's fluid. Our mental health is the same as our physical health. Sometimes, we're out of action, we've got lower back issues or neck, or we have physical health conditions, asthma, diabetes, etc. It can be the same for our mental health, but it doesn't mean that we can't live well if we get the appropriate support, if we're accessing the right services, and we've got that wider community support around us, feel connected and held in that place. So now I invite you to think about, what does managing your emotional health look like to you? When you feel like you are struggling, or maybe you're surviving and not thriving, what things do you do for you that enable you to feel that you've got the space to juggle and manage? So it could be running a hot bath, could be physical activity, could be chatting with a friend, creativity and letting emotions out that way can be great, cathartic. Could be through good food, could be through watching a film with the family, disconnecting. What do you do that nurtures your needs? It could also be that having a drink, everything in moderation. This isn't a judgment zone, but it's thinking about what are our go-tos? What do we do that helps us look after our emotional and mental health? Is it helpful? Is it constructive? As well as then making space for you to be able to do it if you're not in the habit of, and sharing that with your family and letting them know that actually, like I take you to your sports clubs, or like I have your friends over for you to connect, for you to have those opportunities to nurture your emotional health, I need that too. So actually, I'm going to take this time to go and have a hot bath, or go to a class, or go out with my friends, grab a coffee, to address my own emotional health and well-being, because that's what we need to do. And we need to model those behaviours as well. Get into the habit of letting them know that actually we have an infinite supply of resilience. We do need to take steps into nurturing our mental health as well as our physical health, so they start to build that insight and behaviours and way of being for self, and also recognise that actually you're not always going to be emotionally available or physically available, because you need time to tend to your needs to look after your mental health and well-being. So just a short reflection here, and we'll dive deeper into this a little later on. Which brings me nicely into our local mental health campaign, the 5 Ways to Wellbeing. So rather like the 5 fruit and veg a day, it's the same for meeting our wellbeing needs. So there's 5 ways for us to reach that and nurture that. And as I said earlier, ideally we should be doing this daily, like we need to eat 5 portions of fruit and veg a day. But in order for us to maintain that resilience, that capacity, positive mental health and well-being, we need to be meeting the 5 ways to well-being, which is to give, keep learning, be active, take notice and connect. Now, just want you to think about what those topics mean to you. Now, to give, quite often we are giving. We're giving our time, our energy, our resources, but it also gives us a sense of purpose, belonging. But how much time and energy do you give yourself? So it's important to have that balance, like everything in moderation, that healthy balance. So what could you give to your community, to your family? Could be a cathartic sort out of clothes, or in the home, things you don't use anymore, perhaps recycle, repurpose and gift them to someone else or a charity. But equally, how much time, care, kindness do you give yourself, and how could you do that more? Keep learning is exactly what it says on the tin. For a lot of young people, I get groans for this because it's all we do. They're in school, but equally, well, what else would you like to learn that's outside of the curriculum? What else do you want to learn? And it is about ourselves too. What can we learn about ourselves? I reacted like X in that certain situation. That wasn't helpful, or I didn't like that. What can I do moving forward that can help me manage that and feel better about it and not beat myself up and ruminate and replay it in my mind? Could be a language, could be a craft, a skill, whatever. It's keeping that neurological pathways firing, helping ourselves be that confident, congruent self. Be active, another one that is pretty obvious. As I said earlier, moving our bodies enables our brain to come back online. So if we're really, really stressed, we have high levels of cortisol in our brain, which is a stress hormone, and that isn't good. Sometimes we need that level of stress to motivate, to keep us safe. So if we're going to cross a busy road, we need to be aware and alert. But equally, if it's long periods of stress, it can be toxic and damaging to our overall physical and mental health and well-being. It can lead to cardiovascular disease, other diseases within the body. And that's why in the other parts of the mindfulness practice, and I've been kind of alluding to throughout the session, is how body's really good at letting us know when we need to pay attention to our emotional and mental health, because it shows up in our bodies. So if it's upset tummy, tension in the neck, shoulders, lower back, check in with ourselves. What's my body trying to tell me? What am I carrying that I need to put down? But equally, being active helps reduce that cortisol level in the brain. It's really good for enabling us to release endorphins, which is the feel-good factor. It's that good chemical that helps us feel alive and positive. So it could be just putting on some music when you're making dinner and dancing around the kitchen. Get the kids involved, get the partner involved if you've got a partner. It could be just taking the stairs rather than the lift when you're out and about in the community, whether at work or in a shopping centre. It could be walking to the local shop rather than jumping in the car. Small but positive steps in the right direction for increasing our physical activity. Being sedentary now is the new smoking. It's really, although smoking isn't good, but being sedentary is also not positive for our physical health and well-being, and it reduces our quality of life. Taking notice. As I was saying earlier, you can change your route to work with that mindfulness. Take notice of the flora and fauna around us. But one thing that I also highlight here, and I was saying earlier, when you're in your element, what are you doing? Who are you around? So take notice of when you're feeling good, who's around you. Take notice of those relationships. Are they positive? Are they mutually respectful and satisfying? Now, this can be really, really sensitive because we can have loved ones that trigger us or perhaps aren't helpful with ways of us managing our sense of self-esteem. So it's getting into that space of taking notice and thinking about how we can communicate our needs or communicate to them whether they're helpful for our mental health and well-being, or ways that they can perhaps deliver certain messages in a kinder way. Taking notice, being present, being mindful, and having those reflective practice. And then to connect. So that can build those relationships. When you're connecting with someone else, you could share that. Oh, I'd like to share a reflection with you. You're building on those relationships. You're creating those healthy boundaries, that mutual respect, but equally you're connecting with yourself. So that could be through journaling that I've encouraged throughout this session. Could be through mindfulness, taking those minutes to just be, pause, take a breath, meditation. Could be through prayer. It could be through just having a good old catch up, putting the words to right over a cup of tea. Or getting out and about, connecting with nature, coming back to where we originate from, being out walking connecting with nature. Equally, you're being active at the same time, so it's a winner-winner. So think about that. What ways to well-being do you meet already? How could you connect with the other 5? And what could you do more often? Because that is the way for us to maintain positive health and well-being, to build our capacity to cope, because essentially that's what it is. We have lots of stressors, but it's about spinning the plates and making sure that we feel able to manage all of those different things and resourceful enough. So what do you do to nurture your needs, and how can you meet the 5 ways to well-being? More information is on our website under the public health pages on medway.gov.uk website. Links will be popped below. But if you'd like to know more about Connect 5, there's also more information on our web pages. I include this slide in the presentation because it's really easy to judge ourselves when it comes to parenting or being a carer. There's a lot of shame and guilt that we carry, and it just adds to those pressures, and it's not necessary. Our journey is our journey. This is new, the same as everything is to our children and young people. And sometimes if we're co-caring or co-parenting, and that can be across different households, our view, perspectives, choices are different, and that's okay, because we have had different experiences of parenting ourselves, and our parents wouldn't have got everything right either. So there'll be some things that we agree with, disagree with, but it's that space to grow and evolve as a parent, an adult, and a carer. And as long as we're sharing with the person that we're on this journey with reasons behind certain perspectives or understandings or views, then you can be on the same page and perhaps help each other grow, learn, and reflect. It's not a space to be critical to self or others. Perhaps that reflective practice as a collaborative space would be more helpful than pointing the finger, because that's just going to add to that shame and guilt and judgment of self, and can create a vicious cycle, break down relationships, communication. So yeah, that application of more pressure doesn't enhance that thriving family growth space and experience. The same as I've kind of alluded to along the way, we will get it wrong. We get it wrong. Sometimes we have other judgments or views or stuff going on, and we can sometimes react rather than respond. And that's why it's helpful to pause, take a breath, or ask someone if they do come up to you asking for something right now, need your attention right now. If you're not in the space to be present and to hear them properly, is letting them know, actually, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed at the moment, or I'm really tired. I do want to hear you, but right now I can't give you the full attention that you need. So I want to make sure that I hear you properly. Can we come back to this? Or can you give me a minute? I just want to step outside, get some fresh air, or just want to drink my tea. Then I'm all ears. So yeah, it's that knowing it's not easy, and knowing that you're doing the best that you can with the knowledge and the skills that you have. Like I say, our parenting experience will be different to our partners or people that are in our network around us. Even our perception of our parenting experience will be different to our siblings. We might recall in certain situations, and your sibling might be, didn't work like that, actually it went like this, and we delete and distort and have different views of life and experiences, and that's okay. There's no right or wrong. It's about learning and aligning with your needs, your family needs, and growing together. So there's a video coming up about how we react as humans and respond to stress. And this is really helpful to think about those times when we don't always get it right, and when perhaps the additional pebble in the backpack made us fall or just throw it down. So it's by Dr. Daniel Segal. This is also a useful resource that you can share with other parents that you're co-parenting with, if at all, or with your children. Some young people find this a helpful resource to then learn and articulate if they're going to get to that peak of arousal and react rather than respond. So if we're all on that same kind of page and wavelength, and creating those safe spaces of admitting when we're overwhelmed or when we can't cope, that creates the change. So apply kindness at all times to self and others, because we're all on our own journey and we won't always get it right, and that's okay. It's about restorative practice, learning and reflecting and supporting each other on that journey. So I'll leave you to watch the next video.
One of the most rewarding experiences for me has been to study brain science and apply it to the experience of parenting. And the hand model of the brain that I use to teach parents is very useful to understand that. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your palm, put your fingers over the top, this is a very useful model of the brain. And when we can actually see in front of us what's going on in the brain, then we can change what the brain does. So let me walk you through very basically what happens in this brain and the structures in it. And it goes like this. The spinal cord comes up representing the wrist, and then you have coming up into the skull the brain stem and the limbic area, which work together to help regulate arousal and your emotions and the way you have a fight, flight, freeze response. These are below the cortex, the limbic and brainstem areas, and the cortex is this higher part of the brain that allows us to perceive the outside world, to think and reason. And this frontmost part of the brain, right behind your forehead, so the person's oriented like this, is actually the part that regulates the subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas. This regulation is very important because sometimes we can have all sorts of things happen in our life. We're tired, we're exhausted, someone pushes a particular emotional button, and we can flip our lids. So rather than being tuned in and connected and balanced and flexible, we can lose all of that flexibility, even lose moral reasoning, and act in ways that are terrifying to others, including our children. Now, you can actually bring yourself back online and come back to the high road and make a repair with your child, and that's important to explain to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. They need a timeout. And by even just naming that, they can tame it. And that's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and our children to help us all make sense of what goes on in the emotional communication that we have in the course of day-to-day life.
So with the hand model in mind, I'd like to invite you to do a little activity on your stress container. As I was saying earlier, we've got several plates that we're spinning on a day-to-day basis, and that brings stress. And sometimes, we need low-level stress as a motivator to help keep us focused, on board, to do what we need to do. But if we've got too much on our plate, then it can be unhealthy. It can cause disease and distress. And with emotional distress comes, ill health and low well-being, and then we're not thriving, we're going to surviving. So now I'd like you to consider, you can draw this out if you want, or just take a moment and pause and reflect. What have you got that flows into your stress container? So we all have a stress container. They're all different sizes. And you know what? The size of your container can change on a daily basis, sometimes hourly, because it takes one more thing and then it can overflow. And that's when we can snap. That's when we can flip our lid. So I invite you now to write down the various things that you've got that you're managing in your life that adds to your stress container and may take up the space that you have. And that's why when we're talking about managing our emotional well-being, we're making space in our container. What coping strategies that are we using to turn the tap off or to take the plug out, to stop that overflowing, to stop that snapping? So what is it that you do that helps lessen the stress, enables you to cope, and think about those coping strategies, the ways to well-being that you apply that helps you maintain a healthy flow and balance within your stress container. So you can pause it here, or you can choose to come back to it later, but it's a useful exercise to consider if all of the things that you're doing, whether it's around the home, in the workplace, with the children, young people, people that you're caring for, are all of those things that you're doing a choice, or could they be shared? Could you ask for support? Could you choose to do different things or things in a different way? As well as, can you look at your coping strategies with that exercise earlier about the 5 ways to well-being and what do you do to nurture it? What other things could you be doing that are healthier and more helpful in managing your stress and letting some of that out of your container so you can thrive, feel a sense of calm and autonomy in a challenging time? So yeah, either pause it, come back to it later, but it is a really useful exercise. And you can do this with your young people, especially our adolescents, around exam times. They can think about, what is stressing you, what is flowing into your container, as well as your partner's friends, etc. But for you, for now, thinking about your health and well-being, what are your stresses? What evidence have you got to prove to support it? So it might be a statement of, everyone expects me to do everything. Well, what evidence have you got to support that? Or, my boss hates me. What evidence have you got to support that? Because actually, when we're feeling really sensitive and overwhelmed, we can also view things from an unhelpful angle. So it's also a nice way to challenge those views, challenge your choices to manage the stresses that are in your life. We do have a helpful sheet where this is already kind of populated. You can fill in the boxes. So if that would be useful, please do email us and we'll happily send that out to you. So hopefully this session has enabled you to exercise some self-reflection and think about nurturing your needs. In order to flourish, we have to nourish. We have to identify what our needs are, consider our well-being and our mental and emotional health state in order to know how to address our needs and what we need to put into place to protect ourselves and to mitigate any poor mental health or to reduce the chances of developing mental health conditions. We have some additional help sheets, reflective sheets available that touch on what I have mentioned within the sessions, the reflective practice, ways for us to change our behaviour, as well as changing our perception on situations and circumstances. So if that is of interest, please do email us and we'd happily share them with you. One thing I'm sure you've noticed that I've been mentioning throughout this session is quality of life. And this is a model developed by Martin Seligman, looking at 5 core elements that are needed in order for us to achieve a healthy sense of well-being, fulfillment and life satisfaction. I'm running through these Trust will enable you to think about, have you got that sense of life satisfaction? Are you thriving? Have you a positive sense of well-being? And if not, give you some pointers and identify areas that you can choose to work on to align and meet those positive things, and being part of your way of being and identifying opportunities for growth. So the P is the PERMA model. So each letter stands for something, a protective factor there. So we start with the P, which is positive emotion. So this is when we're feeling good about something. We've got optimism, we have that stimulation and creativity, and happiness, life satisfaction, and a really healthy way to boost and bolster our brain health. Just like exercising a muscle in our body, we have to do the same in our brain, is applying gratitude. So an easy, small way to do this is at the end of every day, reflecting on 3 positive things that have happened. It can be as small as anything. It could be, I got showered, or someone paid me a compliment, or the kids put their toys away. Whatever brought you a sense of happiness in that moment, sense of achievement, then reflect on that and be grateful for that. So it gives that positive emotion, it builds that part in your brain, that muscle in your brain. Engagement there. So when are you in flow? When are you completely immersed in an activity where you are not thinking of anything else around you? You're actually just fully connected. Could be a jigsaw puzzle, could be gardening, could be watching a film. You are just totally immersed, engrossed, and allowing you to concentrate on that activity. So you're being in the moment, quite like I was alluding to with the mindfulness practices, giving you some examples of a way to be present, to be mindful in the moment. That allows us to be more in flow, feel that we have more autonomy and time. Try it out, see how it goes. So our relationships, when I was talking about that connection, and earlier I was talking about our relationships, are they meaningful? Are they mutually respectful and satisfying? Have we got that desire to want to be connected to a particular group? Is there a way that you can build and strengthen existing relationships, or ways that you can build new relationships and perhaps find people that are aligned to your interests? Maybe it's a book club, or a sports club, or just a forum for parents or carers to share your experience, because we learn so much from other people. So think about the relationships and those connections that you have. Are they authentic? Do they bring you a sense of belonging, engagement, and positive emotion? So I alluded to this earlier as well, that meaning, that sense of purpose, the reason to get up and out of bed, the drive, the motivator. What have you got in your life that gives you that drive and that active role? So more than just being a parent and carer, because that will come to an end. Our young people will grow up, they will fly the nest, or there's ways that we can also have other meaning in our lives. What gives us that sense of purpose? What gives us that sense of contributing to the wider world and picturing humanity? What else can you do to give you a sense of meaning? And then accomplishment. This is also that positive emotion that I suggested about that gratitude, that reflection. Noticing your achievements, your goals, your successes. Celebrate yourself, however big, small that is, whatever you get pride from, celebrate it. So it could be that you want to set yourself a target or a goal. Is that a smart one? Is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Are you setting yourself up to fail, or do you have the resources and capacity to get to that? So is it realistic? Is it tangible? Are you going to be able to know when you've reached it? Could be that you just do a list on a daily basis, mop the floor, do the school run, whatever it is, tick it off and have that sense of achievement. What's next, and getting that sense of mastery in your life. Because sometimes we don't feel like we have autonomy and choices. We feel like life is happening to us, when actually we can change our perspective, growing on that positive emotion, being grateful, being engaged, really finessing our authentic, meaningful connections and purpose and sense of achievement will enable us to realise that life is happening for. It's how we choose to view and do and be that makes the difference. Okay, so we are almost at the end of this session. I would like you to celebrate yourself for giving yourself an hour to think about your needs and to manage your emotional health and well-being. I've already invited you a short while ago to make a pledge to yourself to apply that kindness, that care and consideration to nurture your health and well-being. So if you didn't do it then, please do it now. And if you did, think about when you're going to do it. Be smart with your approach. Be specific. What you're going to do, when, what time, what needs to be put into place in order for you to achieve it. Does there need to be childcare? Does there need to be certain spaces for you to be and to nurture your needs? So yeah, really do celebrate yourself. You so deserve this space, this time, this reflection, this investment in your growth, in your health and well-being. So thank you for being here. If there are any of the sheets that I've made reference to beforehand that you'd like to help you with this reflection and to identify ways to meet your needs, then please do get in contact. We'll be more than happy to support and signpost you further. I mentioned our web pages beforehand. This is specific to our child health offer, so there'll be lots of information around services in Medway that are aligned to child health needs. And equally, for any other inquiries, our email address is below here. So please do drop us a line if you can't find anything on our web page. So, as promised throughout the session, here are some different resources available locally and nationally to support adults with their mental health. Now, I did mention when we was looking at the cross-axes model that sometimes, life happens, crisis occurs. So we do have a single point of access available in Medway. Their free phone number is there, as well as if you Google it, you can find out about the service and what they can help you with. We also have a talking therapy offer that can support you should you need any counselling, and we've got Release the Pressure and other interventions available in Medway. There is a whole page dedicated to this on the Medway Council website, but the link is below. But feel free to access any of these services. The Stress, Anxiety, Depression NHS Mood Zone is the interactive tool that I mentioned earlier that can give you insights to ways to nurture your emotional health and well-being, different ways to meet those 5 ways to well-being. It's a really fun tool. If some of the suggestions don't align with your abilities or preferences, then you can rejig and it gives you alternative solutions. So that's quite a fun one to play with. I also mentioned earlier in the presentation about the wider determinants of health, the stuff that happens in life that can cause us additional stresses and can be the thing that pushes us over into that survival kind of way of being. We appreciate that things are challenging at the moment, and we do have an offer on the Medway Council website about the cost of living that's happening at the moment. So please do explore that if that is something that you're facing at the moment. More details on the website, as well as if you're facing any housing issues, there is a housing options team that can help you and your family to mitigate any challenges with homelessness. As I said in the beginning, I appreciate that when we are looking after our children and young people or caring for a young person, their mental health and well-being is paramount and usually at the forefront. So if there are any challenges within your family that your young person is experiencing or needing at the moment, I've included some information here that you could reach out to and find out more information available to you and your young people. Young Minds is a national service that also have a parent helpline that I featured here. So equally, our single point of access would be able to give you the information aligned to the needs of your young person. So you can also contact them, they're a local service. So Not all of our young people are always comfortable with speaking to us about their health needs. That's why we have this new service from the Medway Community Healthcare team, providing support and access to various health services for our children and young people. They can access this via the QR code or the number below. So this is something that I felt may be useful for you sharing with your young people if you feel that there's some conflicts or they're not feeling comfortable with sharing certain things with you. And that is a wrap. Thank you so much for accessing this recording. If there has been anything that's come to light, or if you've got any further questions, please do get in contact. Otherwise, I wish you and your family all the very best, good health and happiness for the future. Take very good care.